You water your garden with a hose that's hooked to a meter that ticks up every single minute you use it. You watch that bill come at the end of the month, and you feel your jaw tighten a little more each time. You look up at the sky when it rains, and some part of you does the math. Thousands of gallons falling right over your own roof, running down into a storm drain, disappearing into a ditch somewhere, while you're inside, paying good money for water out of a pipe. And you think, well, that's just how it works now. That's just the system. Nothing to be done about it. I want to stop you right there. Because that thought, nothing to be done about it, that's the thought they're counting on. Not some office full of men in suits plotting against you. Nothing that dramatic. Just a slow, quiet forgetting that happened over about 3 generations, until people started believing water only comes from a bill. My name's Reuben. I've lived on this piece of ground my whole life, same as my father did, and his father before him. We're ranch people. Cattle, some hay ground, a garden my mother kept going through droughts that would make a modern man give up gardening altogether. And I'll tell you plainly, nobody in my family ever depended fully on the town water system, not even after it came through. We used it. We weren't fools about it, but we never depended on it, because we still remembered what my grandfather knew from the Dust Bowl years, and what his father knew before him. That knowledge didn't come from a book. Nobody had a manual. It came from a barrel behind the house, a tin roof, and a gutter nailed up crooked by a man who didn't have money for anything better and didn't need it. Here's the promise I want to make you, plain and honest, no exaggeration. If you understand what I'm about to tell you, really understand it, not just nod along, you can cut your outdoor water use down significantly. You can build yourself a little insurance against the day your water bill jumps or your well runs low. And you can do it without breaking a single law, without hiding anything from anybody, and without spending more than the cost of a nice dinner out. That's the promise. Nothing fancier than that. Why haven't you heard this before? Because your grandparents' generation didn't think it was worth mentioning. It was just Tuesday to them. Now let me tell you where this comes from, because the history matters more than people give it credit for. During the Dust Bowl years, my grandfather's family was working land in the Texas Panhandle, and I mean during the worst of it. The black blizzards, the dust storms that buried fence lines, the years when the sky itself seemed to have turned against the farmer. Water was not a convenience then. Water was survival, plain and simple. The wells ran low, the creeks dried to cracked mud, and when it did rain, and it rained less than you'd think, but it did rain, nobody, and I mean nobody, let a drop of that water hit a roof and run off into the dirt without capturing what they could. They didn't have the luxury of wondering whether it was worth the trouble. The alternative was hauling water in barrels on a wagon for miles, or watching the garden die, or watching the stock go thirsty. That's not a nice historical footnote. That's the difference between a family making it through the year and a family not making it through the year. So they built simple systems, a barrel under a downspout, a cistern dug into the ground and lined with whatever they could line it with, a trough that caught runoff from a barn roof and fed a garden bed below it by gravity, no pump required. This is not invention I'm describing to you. This is recovery. I am not telling you about some clever new gadget. I'm telling you about something your own family very likely did, if you go back far enough, because almost every rural American family did some version of it. Now, let's get into the actual teaching, because I don't want to just tell stories at you all day. The first mistake modern folks make is thinking rainwater collection is some kind of legal gray area everywhere, something you have to sneak around doing. That is mostly not true, and I want to be straight with you about that, instead of scaring you into watching the rest of this video. In the vast majority of states in this country, there is no restriction at all on catching the rain that falls on your own roof and using it to water your own garden. None. No permit, no limit, nothing. A handful of states, Colorado being the strictest example, Utah being a more moderate one. Do put a cap on how much you can store without registering it. And even there, the caps are generous enough for an ordinary household. Colorado, for instance, lets a homestead keep up to 110 gallons without any paperwork at all, split across a couple of barrels. Utah allows up to 2,500 gallons with a free registration. That is not oppression. That is bookkeeping. The old ranch families didn't fight some tyrannical law. They just quietly stayed inside sensible limits and never thought twice about it. Same as you'd stay under a speed limit without considering yourself a rebel for doing it. What people get wrong today is one of two things. Either they assume it's illegal everywhere and never even try, which means they're leaving free water sitting on their roof, going to waste out of pure misinformation, or they go the opposite direction and try to build some giant unregistered tank, drawing the kind of attention that gets a county inspector knocking on your door for reasons that have nothing to do with the rain and everything to do with code compliance. The old people knew the middle path: small barrels, modest volume, outdoor use only. Nobody bothers you because there's nothing to bother you about. That's the first secret, and I want you to sit with it. Legality was never really the obstacle. Forgetting was the obstacle. The second secret is about the method itself, and this is where the physics comes in. And the physics has not changed one bit since my grandfather's day. A simple gutter, a diverter, which is nothing more than a piece of pipe that redirects the first flush of dirty roof water away before the clean water starts flowing into your barrel. And a food-grade barrel with a sealed, screened lid. That screen matters. My grandmother used to say, a barrel without a screen is just a mosquito nursery with a lid on it. And she was not wrong. You want the water going in clean. You want it sealed against bugs. And you want an overflow route so that when the barrel's full, the excess just keeps running off the way it always did, not flooding your foundation. Here's what people get wrong on this second point. They think bigger is automatically better, so they buy one enormous tank instead of several modest barrels. But several smaller barrels, staged along different downspouts, actually make better use of a heavy rain than people expect, since each one fills and overflows on its own, instead of one tank maxing out fast, and they keep you comfortably under those state volume caps I mentioned. And they're easier to move, clean, and maintain. My family never ran one giant tank. We ran 3 or 4 barrels around the house and the barn, and that was plenty for a garden that fed a family of 6 through a panhandle summer. Cost comparison, because I promised you honest numbers, and I intend to keep that promise. A decent food-grade 55-gallon barrel, especially a repurposed one, runs somewhere between $30 and $100 depending on where you find it, and a diverter kit adds another $15 to $30, call it $100, to get 2 barrels properly set up with hardware. Compare that to what a household spends on outdoor watering over a single dry summer, often more than folks expect in a lot of parts of this country, when you're running sprinklers and hoses regularly through a dry summer. That system pays for itself inside one season, and after that, it's just free water, minus the occasional cleaning. The third secret, and this one trips more people up than you'd think, that water is for outdoor use. Garden beds, lawns, livestock troughs if you're set up for that, washing tools, washing the truck. It is not without further treatment, drinking water. I know some of you are thinking about the old stories of folks drinking straight rain-caught water on the homestead, and yes, that happened, out of necessity, in places where there was no other choice. But that is not the recommendation I'm making to you today, and it's not what most states allow without additional filtration, disinfection, and in some cases, licensed plumbing work if you're running it into your household lines. The old families understood the line between what water was for drinking and what water was for the garden, and they respected that line, because getting sick from bad water was a real danger they'd actually seen happen. Respect that line yourself. Outdoor use. That's where the value is, and that's where you stay safely within what the law allows almost everywhere without a second thought. Now, why did America forget all this? I want to be careful here, because I am not going to tell you some story about corporations plotting in a back room. That is not what happened, and I don't believe in dressing up history to make it sound more sinister than it was. What happened is simpler and, in a way, sadder. Municipal water systems expanded across rural America through the middle of the last century. Pipes went in, wells got replaced by taps, and once a family had a reliable tap, there was no urgent reason to keep maintaining the barrel system anymore. It wasn't banned, it wasn't discouraged. It just stopped being necessary, and when something stops being necessary, fewer fathers teach it to their sons, fewer mothers show their daughters how to screen a barrel properly, and within 2 generations, a skill that had been common sense for 100 years becomes something nobody in the family remembers at all. This was not a conspiracy. It was simply a system nobody had to coordinate. Convenience did what regulation never could have done. It made the old knowledge feel unnecessary, and unnecessary knowledge fades on its own, quietly, without anyone deciding to erase it. Let's talk about doing this yourself, because I don't want to leave you with just stories. You'll want food-grade barrels. 55 gallons is the standard size, and you can often get these second-hand from a food distributor for less than buying new. Just make sure whatever was in it before wasn't anything toxic. You'll want a simple diverter kit for your downspout, a screened and sealable lid, and a spigot near the bottom for drawing water out with a hose or a bucket. Set the barrel up on a stand. Cinder blocks work fine, so you get gravity flow instead of having to tip the whole thing. Keep it a reasonable distance from your foundation, a few feet at minimum, so overflow doesn't pool against your house. Check your local rules on volume, though for most of the country, 1 or 2 of these barrels won't come anywhere near a limit that exists. Clean the screen every month or so. Drain and rinse the barrel at the start and end of the season, and in freezing climates, drain it entirely before the first hard freeze so you're not cracking a barrel full of ice. I'll be honest with you about the limitations, because false promises don't serve you. This works best in climates that get regular, moderate rainfall. It is not going to solve a true desert drought on its own. It works less well if your roofing material sheds chemicals you don't want in your garden, so check what your roof is made of. It takes a little bit of ongoing attention, nothing burdensome, but it's not something you set up once and forget entirely. And it will not replace your entire water bill. It will meaningfully reduce your outdoor water use. And that's the honest truth of it. No more, no less. My mother kept a garden through summers so dry the ground cracked in the yard, and she never once ran out of water for her tomatoes and her beans, because she had 4 barrels doing quiet work every time a cloud so much as thought about opening up. I remember helping her drag the hose from the barrel to the rows when I was a boy, and I remember thinking it was just chore work, nothing special. It wasn't until I was much older that I understood what she'd actually built, a small piece of independence that no utility company, no drought, no broken pipe could take away from her. So I'll ask you what I always ask at the end of these. Tell me in the comments what your own family did. Did your grandparents keep a barrel? Did somebody in your family have a cistern out back nobody talks about anymore? What did you learn from them? And does any of it still work at your place today? I read every one of these, and I promise you, somebody in your family knew something, even if you've never thought to ask them about it. Next time, I want to talk to you about something my grandfather built into the side of a hill that kept meat and vegetables cold through a panhandle summer without a lick of electricity, a root cellar, and the reason most of America has forgotten what a properly built one can actually do. There's an old rain barrel still sitting behind my mother's kitchen window, rusted at the rim now, not much use to anybody anymore, except as a place for me to rest my hand when I walk past it. But every time I do, I think about how much that one plain barrel did for a family that had nothing else to lean on. The old Americans knew something valuable. We simply stopped remembering.